Sorry, Dave, I'm just on to Spencer. Just let me just finish this up.
No worries, mate.
Is that...
We would take those, yeah.
Do you like my new dark view to the room?
Oh, that's super kind. Thank you.
Or is it better light?
What, are you in the basement?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're doing great stuff there, aren't you? Obviously, that's fantastic. All hats off to you for that. But yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, you got, well, everyone's going a little bit stir crazy, aren't they? It's just, I think I'm just lucky because this is actually my normal daily job anyway.
Yeah, I sort of read that when you said, well, this is, you know, I'm not going to have to think too much. But me, it's like,
yeah.
This is the opposite of what I'm used to.
No.
Anyway,
Shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, mate. Okay, look, really appreciate that. I'll start doing it, and I'll show you what our plans are afterwards as well, and it'd be good to get your feedback then.
Thanks, Whaley.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Stay safe.
Yeah, Spencer. Yeah, yeah. Joshing, Spencer. Yeah. Okay, ciao. Have a cappuccino on me.
You're jealous of mine and Spencer's love. Big shout out to Spencer there from Paramount, who didn't know he was going to be at the start of the podcast. And I will say a great shout out to them, actually, Dave, because I mean, Spencer is there in his office by himself. Hello. He's there himself.
What do you want, Kev? A sweet? Just go and get them from that cupboard over there.
Have as many as you want.
Daddy's busy now. This is what working from home's like.
This is the new life.
Right, go and get one from that cupboard over there with the camera on me. Right, if I get you sweets, will you go away?
Yeah.
Promise? Okay, I'll be right back.
I'll continue while you're there. Yeah, the absolutely amazing business. Well, you've heard me go on about Paramount. You probably saw the interviews. Spencer's there, sat in the office by himself, and they're doing food parcels. They're a food bank and helping out that. You know, at times like this, pulling together for your local area. Unsurprised. So as usual, just hats off to the team. They're absolutely impressive. And look, I know a lot of you are doing different things here in terms of what you can possibly do. So do keep us informed, and we'll try and shout out about them as much as we can. David, have you?
Hey, good morning. How are we doing?
Solved the sweet crisis.
I'm loving working from home. It has its challenges.
Yeah.
As you know.
Well, I think you're getting to know this because, of course, this is the weird thing about this little world of ours, estate agents and suppliers. Because suppliers, to be fair, this is our life. This is what we've always done. Watch a bit of Jeremy Kyle. No, I mean, of course, make our morning calls.
I loved Simon Bradbury's thing on the Daily Whaler yesterday.
Well, Bradbury's just a force of nature, isn't he?
He's a lot funnier than you initially think he's going to be.
Very dry sense of humour, and yes, he's got a remarkable arse for his age as well.
I was saying he was actually, carrying a bit of a package there.
Well, what we should do, I think, probably at some stage, maybe into the 4th series, is we should start rating arses around the industry, and it can work on 2 levels: who's an arse and who's got a spectacular arse.
Okay, and we should be equal opportunity, so we should have men and women. There should be no reason why
I really don't think
on men.
I don't think after Weinstein has just gone down with coronavirus that we should be joking about that. Oh, by the way, is that the best ever final fuck you eulogy of a Me Too hashtag? Weinstein gets coronavirus hashtag Me Too.
Well, I think Jonathan Hanford does this sort of Jonathan's positive news, and his first line of the positive news yesterday was that Harvey Weinstein's got coronavirus, which I thought was a little bit, I don't know, there, but for the grace of God goes any of us, Simon.
Sorry, are you making excuses for Harvey Weinstein?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying it's
You
easy
are.
within a closely packed prison population.
It's
for
the
you to catch
surname, isn't it? It's the surname. We know what's going on here. Anyway, enough of that. We're not getting into a whole messy area there. Look,
Simon, COVID-19 doesn't care what religion you're on. Okay.
David, where's your black band?
Oh, for Greg's, isn't it? It's a very sad day.
How quickly you forget?
And we're with you.
You.
Well, I'm going for a Hawaiian sort of look today.
You could have told me, because I'm going for Boeing, because obviously there's a business that knows about being completely fucked. So I thought...
because that's a very heavy metal object that's never getting off the ground.
And I think that every time I take off as well, which is a separate thing. So what have we got today then, David? Because we are back officially. This is you and me talking, albeit, let's do it, through the prism of the Zoom wall. And
Ebony and ivory.
There we go. Oh, almost happened there. It's like a digital glory hole.
And you know what? If we had a paywall right now, we'd be making money out of this.
Well, we don't worry about money here at Kerfuffle.
Okay. So we've got a new segment on the show.
Yep.
And that music signals the beginning of our new medical section.
Oh!
Previously, we've only offered ad hoc legal advice to our listeners. We're now going to start offering ad hoc medical advice. So,
is there anything this podcast doesn't do?
We'll offer ad hoc advice on anything. Anything. I don't care. You ask us, we'll give you our opinion.
We are generalists. We are specialists in generalism.
We're very, very general. So this week, honestly, we cannot stress this enough to our viewers and our listeners that really taking care of yourself, socially distancing, that's very important. Stay at home, protect lives. Say the NHS, isolate, but don't go anywhere. But we've all been subject to these daily briefings from Number 10. And usually it's Boris in the middle making some sort of apology for not having done something. And he's always flanked by a couple of experts. And in the first week, we looked at those graphs they were telling us about suppressing the curve. Yeah. And I think that's also very relevant if people are going to start working from home. Yeah, because we all know that working from home, actually, for most of us, is synonymous with... Yeah, here we go.
Okay.
This is what the experts are worried about, yeah?
Yeah.
Over here, this represents the number of wanks that you've had.
Number of wanks. Okay, so this is all science. This is science.
Here's time across the bottom. Now, this line over here, anything above this line is seen to be critical. That's where our capacity to handle wanks goes through the roof. You're putting too much strain on the system, and also is going to lead to you peaking very, very early at the end of week 1. Yeah. What you like to call, Simon, WBO.
Yes.
Which is wank burner. Yeah. And obviously you've got peak wanks per hour here at the top, and this area here is known as Whaley's Folly. So I'm really advising our listeners that if at all possible, stay away from that. What we actually want you to be doing is to suppress that curve as much as possible, so that the graph begins to look something like this.
Yeah, it's not quite as erotic as the previous graph.
It's not, and that's very much the point. You see, time over here, as you'll see, goes to 3 months, which I think is roughly speaking how long we've got in isolation here. So if we can stretch this out and keep the number of wanks per day down, then we safely fall into what us scientists call Whaley's hump.
So that's a lot of Yomdel and Moneypenny socks.
Moneypenny, honestly, the strain on Moneypenny services at the moment, it's pretty much like our NHS. I can't make a better analogy. They are running out of socks, and rapidly.
Okay. So first of all, I want to compliment you on your colouring. Your colouring is just above that of a 5-year-old child. Now, can I ask you, did your lovely daughter help you out with that?
She did, and we've had a whole interesting discussion on what wanks are and who Whale is.
Well, your wife must be just so pleased. So pleased.
You know what? She's been called into an emergency this morning.
Oh,
and so the kids are actually quite happy because she's very strict with the homeschooling.
Yeah.
Your missus is a teacher.
She's teacher, so she gets called in now because obviously they've got they're doing it on rota, but they're doing it for the key workers, obviously. So they've still got to go into school to keep the key rota. So every time she comes back, I'm insisting she's in like a hazmat suit, and then we just kind of spray her down. But
any excuse to spray her down.
Yeah. Yeah. So come on then. That's fantastic, David. I mean, I think most people will say that is a great addition to the show, and they will be looking forward to more graphs and.
I think so, because as much as we're all a fan of the EA podcast with their very practical, useful information for agents, and Sam Hunter and his crew, they have nothing like this, Simon. Which. No.
We were just talking there about bogus, obviously medical advice. Have you seen what the arch douche Trump has been coming out with over the last few days?
I believe he's come up with a cure, has he not?
He has. Let me just read you this. 3 times last week, Donald Trump defied expert advice and touted anecdotal evidence that the anti-malaria drug chloroquine might cure COVID-19. It's been around for a long time, the president said on Thursday, so we know that if things don't go as planned, it's not going to kill anyone. Well, let me just add a little follow-up to that story there, David. Arizona man dies after attempting to take Trump coronavirus cure.
I'm not laughing. It's a very sad story.
It is a very sad story, and it's one of these ones that actually just comes to show about the danger of that man when he talks about, the old fake news, and he literally manages to put science to the side. This is what actually the result is. And here it is. Listen to this. A Phoenix area man has died, and his wife was in critical condition after the couple took chloroquine phosphate, an additive used to clean fish tanks that is also found in an anti-malaria medication touted by Donald Trump as a treatment for COVID-19. The man unfortunately could not be resuscitated. And the wife said, Trump kept saying it was basically pretty much a cure, the woman told NBC. She said her advice would be, don't take anything, don't believe anything, don't believe anything the president says and his people, call your doctor. Now, I wouldn't agree with the first part of that, don't believe anything, but certainly call your doctor, I would suggest, is a wise angle, don't you?
See, I think that says more about the American people than anything else. His approval ratings are still through the roof.
Yep.
And if Boris Johnson got on live TV, as he did the other night, and warned people not to do certain things, we know they would do the absolute opposite, which tells me about the British.
Yeah.
Scenes over the weekends and people sort of flocking to parks and.
How do you think, on a scale of 0 to 10, how do you think the Brits are before we hit this horrible Italian phase, as they call it, which I assume is just being really smooth? No, that's racist, isn't it? No, how well do you think the Brits are doing at the moment out of 10?
In terms of quarantine, so it depends. If I judge it on the social distancing in the queue at Aldi last night, I'm going to go for a 1.
Oh boy, okay.
I could not have been closer to the woman next to me had we been intimately involved with one another.
Right. So there are pluses.
There are. I was wearing a mask and gloves.
Okay.
And,
nothing to do with the disease.
So I don't think they'll ever catch me. No, but genuinely, I think Boris's point about the social freedom is very important. I don't think the British public are used to being quarantined or told to lock down. So you've got countries such as Germany And if you tell them to stand on one leg, you can
They'll
come
do
back
it.
3 weeks later and they will still be standing.
And this is, and I mean, because your wife is I was going to say famously German. That's the wrong way, but
Infamously German.
but the point is, Germany over there has a huge amount. I think there's like 25,000 cases, and yet the deaths I think are in the low hundreds. And everyone at the moment is saying what is going on there. And of course, a lot of people are saying this
Combination of two things. I think they are generally, as a people, not the friendliest of people in the world anyway. So, if the Italians are on one scale where they kiss each other hello, the Germans are like, they're not very likely to wave at you even from across the street. But I think they're extremely sort of cold, clinical people in general. I know I'm generalizing, but if you tell them to do something, they will stay at home. But their medical system is absolutely second to none.
And they've been testing. They've been testing left, right, and centre.
They've been testing, I think, more than any other European nation, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Korea, I think, is going to the next level, but Germany certainly seems to have got it wrapped up.
And that's what worries me about the UK's approach. So everybody was quite, at the beginning, I think only a week ago, everybody was saying, there's only been 30 deaths. That's okay. There's only been X many cases. We're now, last night, I think we were at something like 426 deaths, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Maybe even more. And each one of those lives a very, very sad loss, obviously. But it is, to go from 30 to that number in a week is, for one particular disease, is just phenomenal.
That graph following Italy is the most staggering, and because you do look over there and you see it's like a scene out of 28 days later, and then you see the graph, and in some areas we're actually just ahead of their curve. And I'm famously down on this idea that we have got a blitz spirit at all, and we only have to see the toilet paper wars and everything else, and to see that from my point of view that's a fallacy.
I'm going to stop you right there about the toilet paper wars. We just spoke about Germany, so my mother-in-law lives there.
Yeah.
And last week I think she's only ever had her car broken into once, and this was that one time, and they stole toilet paper from her.
What was she doing, leaving it on the back seat? That's insane. That's mental.
I don't know. You just assume it's going to be a perfectly law-abiding place, But that just shows you that it's not just the Brits who are going to extremes with toilet paper. It's pretty much everybody. And I think it shows you that when you're put in a corner as a human, you turn into that animal.
The famous quote, isn't it? You're 3 meals away from civilization collapsing, has never seemed so true, hasn't it? And for me, even 3 Greggs, meals without Greggs is pretty horrific.
I went into Greggs yesterday for the last time ever. And the staff...
Not ever, David. Not ever.
It would tear me. I was singing "We'll Meet Again." They just didn't know when they were going to be back in. They were very, very upset.
Oh, okay. Oh, this is sweet too.
Daddy's at work now. Yeah. Go and do some schoolwork.
Not touching that.
Now what?
You need to give me schoolwork.
Do you know who that man is?
I'm the head teacher.
Do you remember Mr. Tumble?
Yeah.
That's Mr. Tumble's brother.
Mr. Tumble.
You sign.
Don't start crying. Don't start crying.
Right, leave me alone. I'll be finished in 5 minutes, and we'll do something really fun. This is unscripted. I must tell you, this is entirely
as good as North Korea Man. This will go down as.
Right, that's enough now.
No.
I want to talk to Uncle Simon about something important now.
Don't.
What about watching TV?
No.
You can watch whatever you
That's
want.
boring.
What about you can watch whatever films you like?
That's boring.
Watch an adult film.
Boring.
Deadpool.
You can catch the end of Babe Station if you hurry.
I don't care.
Okay. What about we've done sweets, chocolate,
No,
ice cream.
I don't want food.
So what do you want?
I want to do something.
Right, we're gonna go and do some work in a minute. Honest. Honest.
No.
Yeah, no, in a second.
No.
I'm gonna edit this bit, Simon.
How
extensively. How long? I need to finish this call with Simon,
But
okay?
you took really long calls.
Yeah, it's give me
It's only one.
Really long
Sam-
poos.
Excellent. Here on the Kerfuffle podcast, David Mintz outed as a long pooer.
Well, you know what? If I maybe take this call in the toilet, that would be easier.
No,
Actually.
don't.
Right, go away for 5 minutes.
No.
Honestly, let me finish this.
No.
They used to respect me around here.
I think the respect point has been really laid out here, hasn't it?
Just 1 second. Right, come with me.
Always getting serious. So there, listeners, just to show that we have a real family friendly side to us as well. Mine are strapped upstairs, so you don't have to worry about that. There's no chance. They're in the opium den. So whilst we wait for David to restrain that, I think it was worth actually having a look at what else was there come up as well. I'll tell you one thing. Obviously, I was looking at the property industry. I showed us the news that we really didn't want to hear, which I think we all knew and were getting along with, which of course is the effects of the Boris bounce, if you want to call it that, where sales had actually hit a 4-year high in February, according to the land registry. So, I mean, that's just, hello, he's back. Hello. David, we're just talking about that news about the land registry, obviously, the 4-year high. What do you make of that?
I think somebody's got a very cruel sense of humour. That's what I think.
It's sick.
I think that news ordinarily would have been one of the, it would have been something that would have pushed agents on to carry on to this sort of second quarter of the year and really sort of hammer it. But I think now, in the context of what's happened, we've got a whole new sort of lexicon, haven't we? I mean, I don't think I've ever used the word furlough before.
I literally had no idea. Like I do with all things, I do the Homer Simpson and just nod as the little chimp does the clap in the head.
So for those of you that haven't already got to grips with what a furlough is, so the government have come up with a scheme to allow employers to retain jobs because they're very keen that people will not be laid off or unemployed. So that would be very bad news for morale in general. Yeah. So they are going to make available up to 80% of somebody's salary up to a gross income, I think, of $2,500 per month. Now it's up to the employer. They've got the option, if they want, to top it up by the other 20%. So you can pay your staff 100%. But obviously, the cruel twist to this is that although it's help, officially speaking, people are not allowed to work when they're on furlough. They've got to be on leave.
That's a bit tough, isn't it? Isn't that
that's difficult because if you want to retain your staff, yes, you may take the view, as a lot of companies have, that 20%, so topping up that income from the 80% to 100%, is actually a small price to pay for staff loyalty in the long run.
Yeah.
But the issue here is that if you want a business to come back to in 3 months' time, you're also going to need staff to be actually actively working in it. So there is, as I understand it, and I've sat in on a couple of webinars from different HR experts. And again, this does not constitute formal legal advice or HR advice. It's ad hoc legal advice. But apparently, it is possible, technically, for people to volunteer to work or to actively pursue work themselves if they're bored, and some people may obviously try and do that. And again, I think any company that is looking at those massive sort of cash flow issues, it's a fine balance between using that furlough as a crutch and actually being impeded by it as well.
I haven't thought about that element of it actually. That's fairly that strikes me as something that just needs resolving pronto, though, doesn't it?
Well, I think there needs to be some of that cognitive dissonance going on, where you say, okay, look, furlough's furlough, but we'd like you to consider pitching in and helping out from time to time. And I think most of the companies especially agencies day to day, I think you'll see transaction levels dropping off. Just the fact that your ability to move and to move people into properties is impeded by the actual movement of civil liberties in the country at the moment. Because we're all on lockdown, I don't think you're going to see that much transactions actually sort of completing. So agents' jobs become very much different in the next few weeks, and it's about maintaining visibility to the general public as much as you possibly can, and trying to stay relevant. And if you listen to, I mean, we've done a number of great podcasts last week, and I know they were put together on the fly, but we had some brilliant guests, and one of them was Jerry Lyons, and he talks about the sort of content that agents are going to have to pump out there. And I think the best agents are doing work that supports the community. So, rather than talking about how amazing your figures are going to be, well, you can't, because you just won't have those figures to boast about in 3 months' time. You move to a sort of a community support role. So you're going to be talking about special deliveries that are taking place for people that are in isolation. You may be giving out free resources for homeschooling. So it's all that sort of community support. And as agents, I think the ones that will be remembered best are the ones that are going to be doing that sort of work in the coming weeks. So the actual work that agency staff can carry out is going to be reduced. Prospecting becomes almost a very cruel thing now, because you've got, famously, everybody says, I haven't got the time to prospect. Well, now you've got all the time in the world, but to actively prospect people, to get them to the market to sell,
you've got to be very careful about that. The way, I mean, I've been speaking to a lot of people who obviously say, well, you can go into prospecting mode, but there are a huge amount of people at home and saying, what the fuck are you doing calling me at a time like this? I mean, it's always a delicate, you've really got to work on your scripts with your staff to avoid, I mean, unfortunately, some people, will take it that way anyway, but this has to be presented in the right way to avoid it being seen as a blatant prospecting call.
I think the best way to do it is literally that you are calling in on people and you're checking to see how they're doing. And if you end up just having a chat with them, asking them about their health and their family, talking through any anxieties that they may have from a property perspective, there's always going to be questions asked. So that can be done. You'll see suppliers as well, because we've spoken about suppliers pretty much all week last week. We focused on Rightmove and their handling of this massive PR disaster. But it's interesting because you see now suppliers coming out to support the industry in a way that I genuinely never expected. I know you've worked in the supplier world for forever, and you see a lot of good people, but from the other side of the fence as an agent, sometimes it feels like a one-way relationship where you're paying and it's take. But I think at the moment we're seeing massive flexibility being offered by prop tech companies, not just in the portal realm. We're talking about, even it's now filtering down to CRM companies as well. Yep. I know that Repit released an email to everybody yesterday. And I never knew this, but Gary Barker's wife works on the front line as
dealing with.
And again, what they're doing is they're freeing up some of their staff members to actually go and volunteer, which I think is admirable. But they're also giving agents the essential flexibility to be able to work from home. And again, this is being echoed by a number of different companies. And Agent OS, I believe, are about to release today, I think, an ebook.
It's really good. Yeah, it's a really Jez has been kind to share it with us there. I think it's exactly what's needed at the moment. I think one of the difficulties, I've been talking to a lot of suppliers, trying to encourage them to do things such as the Guild came out with. Kevin Ellis, fantastic, wasn't it, at Land and New Homes, not least the 50%, but that little thing he gave, the ability to drop round to your residents and say, look, do you need help at the moment if you're self-isolating, and what does that help look? I know a lot of people like your good self and Andy Overman and a lot of other agents have adopted that, and it just shows where Kevin's cuteness there, that sort of innovation to turn it into something that helps everybody. It's obviously helping the community at the moment, but it will no doubt help their business at all going forwards as well. Is fantastic.
And it's about the only thing that helps with staff morale at the moment, because these are very dark times for everybody personally, and forget about the industry as a whole. In our industry, we tend to be very sort of myopic. We only see our own problems sometimes, and we don't look at the wider picture. But every industry out there is going through soul searching at the moment, trying to work out what it takes to make it to the end of this. And staff morale is so important, and that buzz that you get out of doing something good can actually go a long way to keeping the mental health of your staff.
You touched on this when we were doing the Australian fundraiser for their bushfires, and we spent a long time. We spoke to Sam, didn't we, about the mental health. I think there is a, you don't want to talk about it too definitively like that, but there is definitely a horrible thing marching towards us. I believe this morning that it was reported that a nurse who couldn't take it anymore committed suicide by taking pills in one of the things after having dealt with it. I mean, they're at the absolute, forefront of this horrendous thing, but everyone's got to stick together as much as they possibly can do in this. And if there is a silver lining in this, I think that actually some of the walls about, I feel like I can't talk about this, have dropped away. And people do feel much more ready to speak to colleagues, even competitors, and say, look, we've got to get through this together.
I think so. And if you have a look at, it's interesting because there's a few people out there, and they're really, all of them have played a role in helping the industry, and particularly to what they consider to be breaking that duopoly, if you like, or the monopoly that they thought that Rightmove had on the industry. And last week, everybody's running around high-fiving and slapping each other on the back, saying, "Oh, I did this, and I did this, and I did this," and they all played a bit of a part. But let's not make anything of it. I think honestly, Corona and a crisis such as on that scale has actually brought agents and people together in an unprecedented way. It's allowed people to put down their prejudices and any sort of if you thought about your competition. I mean, I tried to take the bold step of contacting a competitor of ours who we have a famously acrimonious relationship going back years to sort of portal juggling times. And
you took his German wife, didn't you?
all 6 of them. No, but we, you know what? I thought now is the time to sort of build bridges. So we sent a message out there just saying, look, if there's anything we can do to help, if there's any sort of resources we can share, get in touch. And then
you'll get them back later on, yeah. Just when they're trusted.
When they're the weakest, no. Well, the idea was, honestly, I mean, the message ended, look, if at this time I want to wish you and your family continued good health throughout this period. And literally, we all think about the financial repercussions of Corona, because it really is, in the very early stages of this, we were told that the death toll is not going to be as high as the bankruptcy toll. And we've all started to concentrate on our livelihoods, but really there's a human price being paid here, and it's interesting when you talk about essential sort of medical services that are being cut, the appointments that are being cancelled this week because people are not allowed to go to hospitals in the same way, and that hospitals are at capacity. Unfortunately, a lot of the mental health stuff is being cut out because it's being classed as non-essential.
Of course it is.
Actually, the people that need that as a lifeline, they'll tell you it's probably the most essential thing that they've got.
Just as important, isn't it? And that's really, these tough choices, and that now certainly not the time for the political thing, but definitely the starvation of the NHS over the last 10 years. They were already, the beds were full. There weren't enough of those courses already, and so anything that was going to, and they can say you were never going to be able to expect something like the coronavirus, but there was no leeway in the system at all, was there? And that's the most tragic thing, is the deaths that are going to come from those. I think Boris, to be fair, did talk about it. Secondary sources are going to be, there is going to be a Pain.
But at the moment, if you were to go on to Facebook particularly, it's a very positive space within the industry. There's a lot of people sharing resources. There are people doing free webinars and seminars and anything to keep themselves occupied, but also to share their knowledge with other people. So, I mean, we've been selflessly giving our knowledge to our listeners for weeks, right?
Yeah.
Whether they
those six listeners, they can't be any more grateful, David.
But there are people out there that are. I mean, my missus is a psychologist, so again, this week she'll be at some point 2 Kerfuffle members actually giving. She's going to sort of give some tips for dealing with anxiety and
brilliant.
And looking at these things in different ways. But there are professionals out there that are now giving their time. If you want to learn how to bake a cake, there's somebody doing it right now online. We put that on one of our community groups the other day, and it's fantastic. And that actually does show that little bit of the blitz spirit where people do say, look, I'm good at this. I'm going to share my skills. At least for the next 3 months, we're going to be the best.
I think that's right. And going back to the suppliers thing, one of the things the suppliers and I've been talking to is they've all been they're kind of accepting that very few people are going to be buying or spending, any serious money on any supplier products. That's just not the races at the moment, because of course it could be the difference between getting a member of staff. So unless you can genuinely demonstrate ROI in these difficult times, that's a very difficult place to go. But that shouldn't stop people looking at longer term deals whilst you've got time on your hands to give, if you can give free trials now, or as close to free trials now, to try these things. Because normally, as you quite rightly said, it's a case you haven't got the time on your hands to implement them properly. Well, that shouldn't be the case now. But the other thing is, as well, is there are a number of suppliers out there, of course, that do have tools that are particularly helping in this crisis here. So people like Moneypenny with their digital switchboard, allowing staff to work from home, that ability to, so that they can phone out as if they're from the office, using the office number, so that, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Owners of the business can see what those staff are actually doing. Stuff like that is absolutely second to none. And, we should be shouting about it. And we will be shouting about that on the Kerfuffle website, looking at these tools that can help in this time. And I think you've been adopting it myself. I think Ryan down at Leader Fox, great agent as well. That little video ask tool that we've been using to gain get feedback for the Daily Whaley. Very simple tool. I don't know if it's free. It's a few quid anyway. But you can record a video very quickly, getting feedback or asking for opinions, knocking it over and getting multiple feedback. It allows that contact to still be kept as well as you can possibly do in this.
Ryan has been using it for video tours of property, so
it's really good.
And it's just an excellent tool, and really people want to be, I mean, we talked about this the other day, people want to be looking at a tool like Video Ask and thinking that after all of this is over, because I think a lot of what we're doing now, we're working from home, so we're showing that we're resilient, we're able to, that agility they talk about, we're able to adapt and work in any circumstances. I actually think a lot of good's going to come out of this, and that by people learning to adapt, they're going to adopt new technologies to allow them to help with that. And Video Ask, to me, on a basic level, is a great way of getting viewing feedback. So
absolutely.
If you had a picture, if you had a video of your neg saying, hey, you went to have a look at number 12 Southall Street last night. It was really nice to meet you. We just wondered what you thought of it. And you can give your video feedback really quickly.
Perfect, isn't it?
Something that you can forward onto the vendor straight away. They hear it from the horse's mouth, and it helps you do your job in a really sort of personal way rather than just sort of, holding.
I tell you what it's really good for as well is it's those ones that actually, have probably been dodging the phone call from you, that most problematic one, and you keep feeding back to the vendors. I can't get, I just simply can't get the person who viewed your property to give us the feedback, and they just think, oh, it's the bloody useless estate agent. But there's a growing number of people that will just refuse phone calls unless it's their mum phoning. Tools like this allow them to kind of get that out of the way in their own time, in their own premises, doesn't it? And I think is a really important thing about giving the control back to the individual about how they want to respond to you. There's no point you trying to bully them into the phone call when people, frankly, are moving away from that.
No, it's fantastic, and people like Kevin Ellis, who you mentioned earlier, Kevin, and even Nighty to a certain extent, they're always these sort of people that you can pick up the phone to.
Yeah.
And at the moment, now more than ever, all of them will take your call, and all of them will help you. They will give you time. So we had Stephen Brown on the show last week. He said he'll train you for 30 minutes if you want, absolutely free of charge. Really use this time as agents to take stock of two things. Use it to go through your prop tech. So Simon's got a tool on the Kerfuffle website. Use it to make sure that you know you're anyway going to be going through your direct debit list now and trying to work out what's essential and what's not.
Yeah.
Use Kerfuffle to work out where your savings could be. If you think, hang on, we've got a gap in our tech, so there's a part of our process that needs better support, that could be more efficient, but you don't know what solution plugs into that, call Simon. He will tell you what
Absolutely
you need to speak to. There are suppliers out there that this week are taking calls that they wouldn't normally take. And I spoke yesterday to Christian Bolshen from Van Milde.
Yeah.
And we spoke particularly around the subject of rent guarantee. Because as you can imagine, that is the hot topic. So to summarize the bullet points for people, all eviction processes for new rent arrears that are a result of coronavirus, and again, anything that happens during this period now is going to be termed as a result of coronavirus. So a tenant cannot be evicted for a period of 3 months, so no eviction proceedings can be brought at all. So effectively, it's been taken by the rental market as a 3-month rent holiday. Let's be clear, and Christian was very clear on this as well. From it's a very cruel gift that the government are giving to people. So just as when you turn around to somebody and say, "Hey, look, Mr. Landlord, you're going to get a 3-month mortgage holiday," that actually means that your main capital payments will be suspended for 3 months. Interest continues to accrue, and that 3 months that you miss gets added on to the end of the term of the loan. So nobody's giving it you for free. It's not strictly speaking a holiday. It's just something you're going to have to pay for. And the same goes for tenants. So tenants in rented properties where they're not paying their rent for the next 3 months, they are going to have to pay that rent after this is all over. And therefore, rent guarantees are something that have been very much in the news. Now, it's interesting because the debate around rent guarantee policies has always been, how do we as agents sell them? A lot of agents take the policy themselves and then they sell them on to the client. And there's a bit of a markup going on in between. A lot of people have chosen to package it together with their management fees. So instead of, say, a 10% management fee, you're charging them 13%, but that 13% then includes an element of rent guarantee insurance as well.
Yeah.
This rent guarantee insurance is effectively a legal services policy because the companies that sell them, they jump into action to try and sort of manage the tenants out of the property and bring that non-payment to a head. If they can reach payment terms with the tenant, they do, but very often it really they stop paying out when they get vacant possession of the property. So that very much is the goal. At the moment, nobody can get vacant possession for the foreseeable, at least for 3 months. It could even be extended longer than that. So how does that affect rent guarantees? Some companies have and insurers, especially the smaller ones, they've folded over this, so they're just not able to honour the policies. And in actual fact, you'll see some of those companies closing. You've got companies like Van Milde that are very strong, and they've got strong underwriters as well. And the advice that Christine gave me yesterday was that you should find very few instances where, in actual fact, the insurers have a reason why they can't pay out for a tenant that is unable to pay their rent due to coronavirus. The issue is whether there'll be a frustration of contracts in the long term, whether the insurers will say, look, we're just simply overrun. We never expected an epidemic of this scale ever. Our policies were not designed for that. And whether or not they then come back to the table and say, we can't offer you that, we're going to have to vary our terms to that. So they will initially, in some cases, depending on who the underwriter is, they will just try and knock it back, knock back the claim and see whether or not you go away and you're satisfied with that. But the FSCA should be guaranteeing, I think, about 90%. I've not done a full fact check on this because, you know, I do very poor journalism, as you know. But I think they would
Better
cover,
than your graphs.
they would cover up to 90% of any claim. So nobody should be out of pocket. But we've got this period now where insurers may not be paying out until they do get vacant possession of the property. So we could anyway be waiting for a 3-month period. The companies that have come a cropper are those that used to operate schemes that landlords got paid up front. So there are some companies that pay their landlords 6 months of rent up front, and they back it with an insurance policy. They collect it in from the tenant, and they think worst case scenario, if the tenant doesn't pay it, we're going to claim on the insurers. And the insurers are so overrun at the moment that there's going to be massive cash flow gaps for people.
Yep.
So I think that just as 2008 changed the way that mortgages were sold, I think you're going to find that right now coronavirus is going to change the way that the rent guarantee market goes forward. But Christian and Mark, I spoke to Mark Bevan last night, they've been inundated with questions, and I think they're going to be providing a lot more information to agents in general as to basic FAQs. What happens if my tenant's only paid half the rent? What happens if I can't get hold of the tenant? You know, there are a million different questions that are
which is invaluable, isn't it? And is really needed.
And they are actually really, really helpful. And so I think they're going to gear their customer service department from looking at, yes, everybody was sort of doing crisis management last week. This week is going to be support. It's agent support. It's about giving the community as much support in terms of information and questions that they may have. So that's just one of the companies that are doing fantastic work this week. The other thing that's in the news, and we still need a hero, Simon. We still need a hero for our industry now more than ever.
One that can go outside, though, or
yeah, I'm afraid that's it. They've taken away your kryptonite, and your magical powers was Greg. So can't go out. But basically, we need a voice for the industry because we are sometimes very cruelly hit. So agencies that have got a small enough agency whereby they occupy premises that fall under the government funding for small business rates relief, they will be getting a 10 grand grant from the government. Those companies that have to pay rates and they're over that, they're unfortunately unable to claim the next bracket. I think it was £25,000 of assistance that are being given to retail businesses purely because they don't occupy retail premises. So estate agencies, in terms of planning use, have to be A2. And they are at the moment being discriminated against. So there are massive petitions out there circulating, and I know I heard a rumor yesterday, don't quote me on this, but I heard a rumor that even some of the bigger voices in the industry, possibly even a company like Rightmove, may be trying to put pressure on Westminster to come up with a package for estate agents. I think if Rightmove do pull something like that off, I think it would be an amazing PR. But I think that we need bigger companies within the industry, bigger suppliers to start speaking out on this. There isn't enough pressure directly brought to bear on Westminster on these issues. We are not as well represented as other industries. So we need to firm that up, and it's something that I'm going to keep harping on about until you do it.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. A state agency is discriminated against. I mean, you only have to look at, what's what's goes on from a compliance point of view, and the edicts that come down from on high with the ever-revolving housing minister, don't you? They don't give a fuck, do they, to be honest? The difficulty is, yes, in the past, trying to herd agents has been a case of herding cats, and those organisations have, I think you made the point, maybe got a little bit too pally with the people they're trying to actually, you know, have conversations with and have difficult conversations with. So I think it, you know, it is difficult. I would always be obviously willing to help out, but I don't know what I can do to help other than bring to bear obviously a number of the Kerfuffle members that obviously are very that feel very strongly about obviously some of these issues. I definitely think companies like Rightmove, however, and other ones who have real business acumen and can and have some understanding of this sort of the ability to bring pressure should be encouraged to do so. And I think if there's one thing that can sort of bring people from that side of the table to this side of the table representing you guys, the agents, then it can only be encouraged. And it might be up until now they just haven't felt it was it was their place to do so. But that classically is, isn't it?
I think looking cynically, now more than ever, this is a time for bigger companies, particularly ones that are floated, so they are important to the economy.
Yeah.
And when we love to boast about our tech companies, whether they're prop tech or fintech or whatever, but when I suppose finance ministers look at the state of health of the British economy, they want to talk about the fantastic companies that are leading the way. And in reality, you've got a few prop tech companies that really are pushing, you know, have always pushed those boundaries and are big enough and worth enough on a stock market, at least were until last week, worth enough to really turn heads at Westminster. So if they can use their powers for good, they may even win back a few friends within the industry, because we need that support more than ever. And there's a lot of support coming from within. So suppliers are giving that support to the agents, but it needs to reach further outside of our industry, up to the people that write the legislation.
And of course, it's whether there's any willingness for or bandwidth to be able to hear this stuff at the moment. I mean, with very specific issues like that, you'd imagine so, but you can't imagine anything else is going to get debated anytime soon, is it?
Yeah, no, I think everybody's very much busy dealing with this particular crisis, but as a result of it, it has some real financial implications. And again, Rishi Sunak's been dishing out the cash to pretty much everybody, and it's tough. I think there's going to need to be more that's going to be spent, and it's something that we're going to be carrying forward with us out of this thing as well. So we'll be paying it off for years, but
in a glorious moment of socialism, we're all in this together. And this most conservative of governments.
Let me ask you a question. Generally speaking, obviously you've got the Prime Minister you didn't necessarily want. With this particular crisis, could you have hoped for anybody better to handle it?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, without getting into the detail of it, the medical thing has been an absolute fiasco. Lack of equipment, you'd expect normally there, but the whole element where we didn't have lockdown earlier. And the herd immunity thing was policy, is the most insane thing I've ever heard. The idea that 40 million people have to get this virus with death rates it would have had at that time, I believe, would have led to more than 200,000 more deaths than we had in World War II, is lunacy, and is one reason why I won't be jumping on the Boris bandwagon anytime soon. But that's me being a cynical Corbynite.
I think he's probably had his finest hour this week, and people are talking about Rishi Sunak being the next Prime Minister after. But I don't know how much of that is him, whether he's just really good at reading speeches, or in actual fact, would any finance minister right now have to, in his position, have to do this?
Have to. This is like the New Deal in America, isn't it? This is the Marshall Aid after World War II. This is unprecedented, and I think you wouldn't get anyone coming together, on that basis, wouldn't you? Look, mate, I can see that there is the second sweetie demands are coming through. We've been on for over an hour, which is probably...
That's fine. I'll tell you who we are going to hear. I'm going to tag on to the end of this. We've got Louise Jeffries from SDL.
Lovely Louise.
A nice little piece. So
also, David, we've got two more. I'm going to insist. That little video I sent you on WhatsApp, I think actually you sent on WhatsApp. We're going to put that on the end of after Louise, just for entertainment purposes.
Fine.
It's important to remain cheerful at times like this.
No problem. We will see you again at some point this week.
And just so we know again, Louise is talking to us about what?
Louise is talking to us. Well, basically, she is again in confinement herself.
Yeah.
So she's going to give us a little bit of positivity. Again, I've been keeping that clip to review later on, so I've not even watched it because
there we are. So she could be doing absolutely anything then.
What's this? Oh, it's my Boris wig.
Oh no! Oh dear me, that is truly scary.
Not leaving the homes.
Well done, kids. I know.
All right, guys, this is the working from home special, as you can see.
That is a wrap. Cheers, the Mintzes. Bye, the Mintzes.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello, everybody. I just wanted to say hi and to see what wisdom we can all share with each other about how we broker our way through this slight mad times that we're in. I don't think anybody's got all the answers, but I thought it was worth me sharing what we were doing in SDL auctions to try and keep things, the wheels of commerce going as long as possible, whilst at the same token doing everything we can to protect our people and our families and our wider communities. So I thought it was worth an update. So on a practical level, we are all really lucky that we are able to work from home and we have cloud-based phone systems and people are plugged in and operating as usual. But there's nothing usual about any of this. We're still doing sales, and actually that's one of the things I want to focus on, that actually in this period of time there is something that auctions can deliver, and in some cases that cash flow is going to be literally helping pay people's salaries. I don't think any of us have any eye on making any money at all at the moment. I think if we are able to thrive and survive and get out the other side of it, then by God, it's just going to be relief central. We've taken a hard-hitting position from as a senior management team to say, listen, we're going to do everything we can to keep these afloat and keep people going. And any changes in our business were the ones we were already making anyway. As I say, we're working from home. It's happening. We can help. And actually, that's what I want to do. I don't know what we can do to help, but by God, please ask. You know, if it's a case of supporting you and your teams out there or your businesses out there, you know what, if I don't know the answer, somewhere in my network randomly that will have an answer. You know, we've already seen some brilliant things shared between our businesses already, whether that's from our competition or our greatest allies or whatever. You know, it is now not the time to kind of shut down. It is now the time to open up. With regard to our people, there's a huge change to working from home. Some of the important parts of that is making sure that people feel engaged and not isolated. We've got a lunchtime natter going on, so we all get together and have a chat like we would be if we were in the office. We've had a quiz night, we've random people doing exercises. Wherever possible, we're on Microsoft Teams, we're getting everybody to video call. You know what? It is get dressed, get your makeup on, or boys or girls, whichever. You know, don't sit in your pyjamas, get your dressing gowns off, because actually, you know what? It helps. My kids probably find me a bit annoying because I am there going, no, normal day. You know, you just don't have to walk to school anymore, but you need to be at your desk or at the kitchen table ready to do some work. Now, again, I'm lucky I've got teenagers that I can just shout out occasionally to say, make sure you do some work, or, you know, I'm not talking about little kids here, so I'm very lucky. But in real terms, it's just being sensitive to all of the pressures that we're under. So on a personal invitation is, God, if there's anything I can do to help, great. I don't think a lot of us know what to do with our time, short of doing the immediate things that cross our path. But one of the things I'm really committed to for all of the people that work with us is that if we can't do anything today, right now, to turn a buck, you know, that's actually going to generate cash, which is going to be our saving grace at the moment. If we can't do that, then our energy should be based on getting better, so that when we're on the outside of this, then we are better placed. We are better business people, more rounded individuals, all of those things that you wish you had the time to do, to get better at that sales call, to get better at that customer engagement, to learn more about our business. So in our world, don't just say you're an auction expert. Actually, you know what? Whatever your learning gaps are now, find what they are and do something about plugging those gaps, because we are going to come out of this. We are going to have a bit of crap for a while. And you know what? It will be those of us who proactively do something about the world we're sat in. And we're all the ones that will come out the other side and still have a business behind us. And you know what? Some of us with the best intentions aren't going to have that. So let's do everything we can to help each other at the moment. Because I don't know about you, but I would love to come out the other side of this with as much integrity as a business, as an individual, to say, you know what, I am not doing anything other than to help my people and help some people out there to get over this. And if that means we can help them sell their properties, then you know what, happy days. And if that means we can help an estate agent pay their salary bills, then you know what, I will sleep well. So please ask if you can help. I'd offer you can help. I don't know what I'm saying anymore, but it's just, we're in it together. I promise you that. So if I can help, just ask. Thanks, bye.